Some punishments from the ancient world are so strange, so elaborate, and so extreme that even the historians who study them are left scratching their heads. Not because the records are missing, but because the logic behind them can be hard to fully reconstruct. Why sew a man into a sack with live animals? Why design a death meant to erase someone not just from life, but from the afterlife itself? Ancient justice was often less about simple pain and more about symbolism, ritual, and messages we're still trying to decode. And in many cases, experts genuinely disagree about how these punishments began, what they meant, or whether they were even carried out at all. Today, we're looking at ancient punishments that still puzzle the people who study them. Let's start with the strangest one. Number 1, the Roman penalty of the sack. In ancient Rome, one crime was considered so monstrous that it demanded a punishment unlike any other. That crime was parricide, the killing of one's own father, mother, or close relative. To the Romans, this wasn't just murder. It was a violation of pietas, the sacred duty a person owed to family and gods, and it was seen as an act that polluted the entire community. The punishment reserved for it was called poena culi, the penalty of the sack. According to the most complete descriptions, the condemned person was first beaten with rods, then sewn into a large leather sack, sometimes with their head covered in a wolf's hide and wooden clogs placed on their feet. But the sack didn't hold just the prisoner. It also held live animals, most famously a dog, a rooster, a snake, and a monkey. The sealed sack, with its terrified contents, was then transported to a river or the sea and thrown in to drown. The symbolism was everything. By drowning the condemned sealed away from earth, air, and proper burial, the Romans believed they were denying the criminal any peace in death, erasing them from the world and from ancestral memory entirely. Here's where the mystery begins. Historians still debate whether this punishment was ever actually carried out in its full animal-filled form, or whether it was largely symbolic, a horror designed to terrify rather than to be routinely enforced. The practical problem is obvious. Sewing a struggling person and several panicking animals into a single sack would be a nightmare, arguably as much a punishment for the executioners as for the condemned. On top of that, the famous 4-animal version doesn't appear all at once in the historical record. The earliest accounts, like the case of a man named Malleolus around 100 BC, describe only a sack and drowning, with no animals mentioned. The snake appears later, then the monkey, and the full set of 4 creatures shows up only in writings from the 3rd century AD. This has led many scholars to conclude that the version we picture today is a collage, assembled from sources spanning centuries, rather than a single fixed ritual. There's even a deeper debate about its very origin. Some researchers argue that poena culi may not have started as a criminal punishment at all, but as a religious purification act, a way to cleanse the community of the spiritual pollution the killer had brought upon it. Exactly how and why it evolved is still argued over today. Number 2. The punishment of ostracism in Athens. Not all severe punishments involved physical pain. In ancient Athens, the birthplace of democracy, citizens developed a fascinating and unusual practice called ostracism. Once a year, the assembly could decide whether to hold a special vote. If they chose to, citizens would each scratch a name onto a broken piece of pottery, called an ostracon, which is where the word ostracism comes from. If enough votes were cast against a single person, that individual was banished from the city for 10 years. What makes this so interesting is that ostracism wasn't a punishment for a specific crime. The person banished hadn't necessarily broken any law. They kept their property and their citizenship, and after 10 years they could return with their rights intact. Instead, ostracism seems to have been a political safety valve, a way for the community to remove someone who had become too powerful, too divisive, or seen as a threat to the fragile balance of the democracy, without bloodshed or a formal trial. And that's where historians still find room for debate. How exactly was it decided who deserved this fate? How much was it about genuine fear of tyranny? And how much was it manipulated by rival politicians to get their opponents out of the way? The rules and the true motivations behind individual ostracisms are still studied and discussed, because a punishment based on popularity and perception rather than proven guilt leaves a lot of questions open. Number 3, damnatio memoriae, the erasing of memory. The Romans had another punishment that targeted not the body, but the very existence of a person in history. It was later given the name damnatio memoriae, meaning the condemnation of memory. When a person, often an emperor or someone of high status, was judged to have disgraced Rome, the authorities could attempt to erase them from the record. Their statues would be torn down or recarved into someone else's face. Their name would be chiseled off inscriptions and monuments. Their image could be scrubbed from paintings. The goal was to make it as though the person had never existed at all. Think about how strange and sophisticated that is as a form of punishment. It's an attack on someone's legacy, their place in collective memory, and in a culture that deeply valued reputation and being remembered. This was a profound kind of destruction, but it raises genuine puzzles for historians. For one thing, the erasure was rarely complete. In fact, the very act of scratching out a name often left an obvious blank space that told everyone exactly what had happened, sometimes making the disgrace more memorable, not less. Some scholars debate whether the intent was truly to make people forget, or paradoxically to broadcast the dishonor loudly. And because the practice wasn't governed by a single strict law but applied in different ways at different times, understanding the exact reasoning behind each case remains a subject of ongoing study. Now for the supporting cast. These are a bit shorter, but no less intriguing. Exile and banishment. Across many ancient societies, from Greece to Rome, banishment was one of the most severe penalties short of death, and sometimes it was considered worse. To be cut off from your city, your family, your gods, and your entire social world was, to an ancient person, a kind of living death. What still fascinates historians is how a punishment that involved no physical harm could be regarded as so devastating, and how differently it was applied depending on a person's status, wealth, and connections. Trial by ordeal. In various ancient and medieval societies, guilt or innocence was sometimes determined by subjecting the accused to a painful or dangerous test, such as handling something hot, on the belief that a higher power would protect the innocent. What puzzles modern observers is the underlying logic. These weren't seen as random cruelty by the people who used them, but as sincere appeals to divine judgment. Reconstructing exactly how people understood these ordeals and how much genuine belief versus social pressure was involved remains a rich area of historical debate. Public shaming in the stocks. Many ancient and later societies used public humiliation as punishment, displaying wrongdoers in the open where the community could see and mock them. The interesting question historians explore is why shame itself was considered such a powerful tool. In tightly knit ancient communities, one's standing and honor were everything, and a punishment that damaged reputation could be more feared than one that damaged the body. Understanding just how heavily these societies leaned on honor and shame helps explain punishments that might otherwise seem mild to us. Symbolic and ritual executions. Beyond poenekule, many ancient cultures attached elaborate ritual meaning to how people were put to death, choosing specific methods, locations, and procedures loaded with symbolism about pollution, the gods, or the restoration of cosmic order. In many of these cases, the written explanations that survive are incomplete, filtered through much later writers, or tangled up with legend. That's precisely what leaves scholars debating the true origins and meanings, trying to separate what actually happened from what was later imagined or exaggerated. And finally, the challenge of the sources themselves. This is perhaps the biggest reason so many ancient punishments remain hard to fully explain. Much of what we know comes from writers who lived long after the events, who had their own agendas, or who were repeating traditions rather than eyewitness accounts. A Roman historian writing under the emperors might describe an ancient custom partly to make a moral or political point about his own times. Details get added, dramatized, or misremembered across generations. So when we read about a shocking ancient punishment, we're often looking at a layered story, and untangling the real practice from the legend is a genuine, ongoing scholarly effort. So there you have it. Ancient punishments that still leave the historians who study them with real questions. The Roman penalty of the sack drowned criminals with animals for reasons that blur the line between justice and religious purification. Athenian ostracism banished the powerful without any crime at all. Damnatio memoriae tried to erase people from history, yet often ended up preserving their disgrace forever. It makes you wonder how much of ancient justice we truly understand, and how much we're reconstructing from fragments. These punishments weren't just about causing pain. They were about sending messages, about honor and shame, pollution and purity, memory and oblivion, ideas that made perfect sense within their own worlds but can feel alien and puzzling to us now. And maybe that's the real lesson buried in these strange rituals. That to understand a civilization, you have to understand not just how it lived, but how it chose to punish, and that even the harshest acts of the ancient world were shaped by beliefs, fears, and symbols we are still working to decode. This is a heavy subject, and if any part of it stirred something more personal for you, it's always okay to reach out to someone you trust.